I have been dead for 17 years, though my heart continues its dull rhythm, and my lungs still draw the filtered air that circulates through the catacombs beneath the shrine world's crust. My death did not come with blade, bolt, or blast. It came softly through understanding, a slow, poisonous revelation that seeped into my mind until the man I once was dissolved, leaving behind this hollow vessel that tends the Emperor's remnants in endless shadow. They call me blessed, chosen for holy service, a guardian of sanctity. They tell me my name will be inscribed within the eternal ledgers of the ecclesiarchy when my body finally fails. I believed them once, in the first days when belief still felt possible, when I still remembered my mother's face and the sky's forgotten color, when incense was only a smell and not a suffocating fog that lived inside my blood. The vault that imprisons me stretches for kilometers beneath the cathedral's foundations, a labyrinth of corridors carved through ancient rock. The walls are forever wet, sweating condensation from the clash between subterranean cold and the fever heat of 1,000 devotional candles burning above. The moisture crawls downward in thin rivulets that draw patterns I have memorized so completely. I can see them when I close my eyes. Sometimes the trickling lines seem to shape words in a tongue almost known to me, before I force myself to look away, whispering the creed of denial, reminding myself that to notice too much is to stray toward damnation. The air tastes of stone dust, melted wax, and the faint sweetness of rot that no amount of sacred oil can conceal. That scent has become the perfume of my existence. It clings to my robes, saturates my flesh, lives in the marrow. I can no longer imagine air that does not taste of decay. I was 23 standard years old when I took the oaths that bound me here. I can still recall the gleam of the archdeacon's vestments as I knelt before him, the congregation murmuring behind me like a sea of obedient ghosts. My voice was clear as I spoke the vow, to preserve and protect the Emperor's holy artifacts, to defend them from the touch of the unworthy, to maintain their sanctity until death or release by the Church. The latter clause was theater. Every initiate knew release never came. Relic keepers serve until their bodies collapse, until their sight dims and their bones lock. Even then, service does not end. The dead are interred within the ossuary chapel, their skulls set into the walls to watch the relics they tended. Death is simply a continuation of labor in quieter form. My first charge was a single bone fragment, 3 centimeters of yellowed matter sealed in silver and crystal. The inscription identified it as belonging to Saint Melona the Resolute, martyr of the 3rd Centennial Crusade, who held a breach against the greenskin hordes until her final breath. Each morning I polished her reliquary with sacred silk, breathing lightly upon the glass before wiping away invisible dust, my reflection bending around the bone. Then I recited the 47 verses of Melona's Passion, each line cataloguing her wounds, her prayers, her surrender to agony in the Emperor's name. My predecessor, old Corvin, trained me in the methods. His voice rasped through the dark like sandpaper over stone as he showed me how to measure the consecrated oils, how to inspect the seals for weakness, how to sense the subtle wrongness that precedes corruption. His eyes disturbed me even then, not blind but distant, as if fixed upon something beyond human sight. He spoke with a reverence that trembled on the edge of fear, urging me to remember every instruction, as though the survival of the Imperium depended on it. When he died 3 weeks later, collapsing in the corridor outside the Chapel of Secondary Martyrs, his lips still moved in silence, shaping words no priest could recognize. They placed his skull in the 3rd row, 7th position, its empty sockets facing the entrance. I sometimes imagine that it watches for me. The rhythm of duty consumed me quickly. Days and nights merged until time became meaningless. My cell, a narrow slit of rock containing a cot, a desk, and a miniature shrine, was the entirety of my universe above the vault. Each morning I descended the spiral staircase that corkscrewed 100 meters into the earth. The steps had been worn smooth by centuries of identical feet. Often I counted them to calm my mind. 364, always the same, except on mornings when the number changed. Once it was 365, Once 363, I told myself I had miscounted. The alternative was too dangerous to consider. The vault door awaited at the bottom, a colossus of blessed steel engraved with prayers in a dozen dead languages. It required 2 keys, one that hung from my neck and another delivered each dawn by the archdeacon's servant, a mute youth whose tongue had been taken for some forgotten offense. He never met my gaze. He would hand me the second key with shaking hands, then flee upward as though the darkness itself pursued him. Together the twin keys turned the ancient mechanism, gears grinding and locks sliding open with the groan of a creature waking from slumber. The door's weight filled the corridor with trembling, as if the mountain disapproved of our intrusion. Within lay a cathedral's reflection carved in shadow. Alcoves and niches lined the walls, each containing a relic of sacrifice. Fragments of bone and armor, scraps of banners, vials of dried blood, the detritus of devotion gathered from 10,000 battlefields. The central sanctum held the grand ledger of preservation, a tome bound in something that had once been alive, its pages inked in ancient High Gothic and annotated by generations of keepers. 3,000 pages of rules, cross-references and warnings. Every relic required precise attention. The bone of St. Malchius demanded exposure to candlelight for exactly 17 minutes daily, while his martyrdom hymn was sung in archaic Terran dialect. The tattered banner of Crimson Veil needed incense, brewed from 7 herbs, 3 of which were imported from off-world under the escort of armed clerics. The vial said to contain 3 drops of the Emperor's own blood, a claim the Archdeacon himself admitted was apocryphal. Rested in an armored shrine guarded by a servo skull that shrieked if approached without the proper invocation, so the days passed in ritual precision. At dawn, I began at the eastern wall, inspecting each relic in sequence, noting the slightest deviation. A crack in glass, a shift in hue, a scent of sweetness edging toward rot. Some days nothing changed. Other days the air seemed heavier, as if unseen eyes watched from the alcoves. When such feelings came, I prayed longer and burned more incense until the sensation faded. At least I told myself it faded. Contact with the world above dwindled to near nothing. Only Father Dominic's weekly descent broke the monotony. He was older than stone, his breath wheezing with the damp air. His questions were always the same. Had I kept the relics? Had I doubted the Emperor? I answered as doctrine required, my voice steady, my thoughts elsewhere, drifting toward the idea of sunlight I could no longer remember. Dominic would nod, satisfied, and pronounce that mine was a holy task, that to guard the Emperor's fragments was the highest form of devotion. I clung to his words as a drowning man clings to debris. To admit otherwise would be to face the truth, that I had buried myself alive in this tomb of prayers. For 3 years I served unquestioning. Then the dreams began. They came without images, only sensations, the feeling of vast distances pressing against me, of whispers too quiet to hear, yet too close to ignore. I would wake drenched in cold sweat, staring at the stone ceiling, certain that something had been beside me. At first I blamed fatigue, but the patterns of those nightmares followed my work, intensifying whenever I handled certain relics. The bones were the worst. Each fragment radiated a weight beyond substance, as though they remembered suffering and demanded acknowledgement. Some were warm to the touch. Others drew heat from my skin until it numbed. When I confessed none of this to Father Dominic, it was not cowardice but instinct. To speak of it would mean investigation, perhaps exorcism, and I was no longer sure which outcome I feared more. The whispers grew clearer with every passing month. In the silence between candle flickers, I began to recognize tones, then rhythms, then words that hovered just outside comprehension. The jawbone of St. Teresa emitted faint music, like breath through bone flutes. Brother Matthias's skull produced a vibration that set my teeth on edge and left a metallic tang on my tongue. And the supposed vial of holy blood, that relic of relics, sometimes filled the chamber with a distant scream, drawn out and distorted as though echoing across dimensions. I told myself it was air in the vents, I lied convincingly for a time. Compulsion replaced fear. I began arriving before dawn, waiting by the sealed door long before the servant brought the second key. The archdeacon praised my zeal, calling it exemplary devotion. I smiled and accepted his blessing, hiding the truth that something within the vault was calling me, drawing me downward with a hunger that was not entirely mine. Sleep became optional. Waking and dreaming blurred. When I closed my eyes, corridors of bone stretched endlessly before me, and voices spoke my name in tones that were neither human nor merciful. During my 6th year below, I was assigned the quinquennial inspection of the lower annex known as the Sanctum of Forgotten Martyrs, a place few visited and fewer returned to unaltered. Dust coated every surface, and the air carried a cold that seemed to come from within the stone itself. It was there, amid neglected relics whose names had faded from record, that I found the object that would end my illusions. It was a cracked reliquary containing a splinter of bone labeled Unknown Martyr, Origin Lost. The inscription at its base was unlike any script I knew. The letters shimmered, refusing to remain still, and staring too long sent waves of nausea through me. When I traced them with my finger, clarity struck like lightning. The relics were not holy. They were prisons. Every ritual, every prayer, every careful anointment was not preservation but containment, bindings forged of faith to keep something vast and malignant asleep. The Emperor's Church had built its shrines atop cages and named them temples. We keepers were not guardians but jailers, maintaining the locks through constant devotion. I felt the truth slide into me like a blade of ice. These relics were not inert. They were alive, and they had been waiting. I did not flee when the realization split me open. Though my legs twitched with the memory of flight, and my lungs clenched as if the air itself had turned to knives, instead I steadied the cracked reliquary on its plinth and listened to the silence that followed, a silence so dense it felt like a presence, breathing beside my ear without warmth or moisture. The cold awareness that I had spoken a forbidden word inside myself, and the vault had heard it. The candle flame nearest to me guttered inward as though inhaled, and the wet walls seemed to draw their rivulets back against gravity, as if time itself had stumbled in the doorway, and the corridor waited to see whether I would kneel or run. The choice that was not a choice at all, because the bindings do not only hold the things we call relics, they hold the hands that tend them, and the minds that dare to understand them beyond the stories carved for pilgrims. I resumed my inspection with the exaggerated care of a penitent performing public contrition, reading temperatures from old brass dials, testing seals with breath and cloth, anointing hair-thin cracks with oil that smelled of peppered myrrh and rust, all the while counting heartbeats to keep my thoughts from racing down dark staircases. Numbers were safer than ideas, and I clung to them like a drowning man to wreckage. 17 drops for Malchius, 47 verses for Malona, 3 revolutions of the censer for the banner shard that shed soot like snow. Ritual steadied the hands even as it chained the mind. And in that hour I discovered the first law of the Warden's heresy. That precision is the final refuge of those who know the truth and cannot leave it. The whispers changed after that day. No longer stray breezes through choked vents, but structured, patient, as if whatever lay within each cage had adjusted to my comprehension and tuned itself to a frequency my altered hearing could receive. St. Teresa's bone song resolved into intervals that repeated over exact spans. Brother Matthias's skull hum now broke into 3-part pulses, like coded knocking on a submarine hull. The vial in its armored niche throbbed at the edge of audibility, like distant engines under load. And between these threads I began to detect counterpoint, messages woven through messages, a net of utterance stretched across the vault that tightened whenever I passed beneath it, with my lamp and my ledger, not threatening yet not merciful, simply attentive in the way a sea is attentive to those who drown within it. Father Dominic noticed the fatigue pooling beneath my eyes, but mistook the source and offered permitted remedies. A day in the upper cloister gardens under shield glass, an extra hour of rationed sunlight from the cathedral heliostat, permission to eat fruit reserved for choristers on feast weeks. I accepted the kindness because it was human, and because it provided masks for my exhaustion. Yet the light above struck me as shallow water over abyss, and the taste of sweetness sat wrong on a tongue trained to stone, dust, and wax. The world of air felt thin as a painted backdrop, and I longed for the pressure of the vault with the helpless craving of a diver for depth. When I admitted this to myself, I understood the second law of the Warden's heresy, that the bindings seep both ways, and the prison remakes its jailers as surely as its prisoners, on the morning I returned to the lower annex. The mute servant lingered on the last stair, as though his feet had discovered roots in the worn stone. His eyes tracked the seam of the vault door instead of my face. His lips shaped a soundless phrase that matched none of our litanies, and when I took the second key, his fingers closed around mine too long. As if by contact he might borrow or pass a charge, I felt a faint resonance travel knuckle to wrist, like the tail end of a bell's note. The boy startled, snatched back his hand and fled upward. I did not call after him because I recognized the tug behind his gaze, the first soft hook cast by depths that have chosen their next swimmer, the cycle drafting a new vessel, even as the old one still floats. The sanctum of forgotten martyrs had not grown since my last visit, yet its angles refused to remain domesticated. Shelves leaned by fractions never captured in carpentry manuals. Distances stretched or shortened between steps, and the air carried an orientation like a subtle slope drawing all thought toward the cracked reliquary with the shifting script. I brought a fresh candle, but its light traveled differently here, refusing to bloom outward. Crowding close to my hands like a child who has learned to fear dark corridors, I set my ledger upon the lectern and found, without writing, that a line had appeared in the margin in my own cramped hand, a notation of protocols I had never learned. 7 breaths held before reading, oil applied counter-sunwise, silence maintained through the 9th heartbeat. I obeyed because disobedience here felt like speaking aloud during surgery. When I traced the inscription again, the clarity returned, not as a blade but as a door unsealing under its own weight, and behind it I sensed not a single presence, but a chorus without number, some large as mountain weather, some fine as dust motes that cut the lungs, none of them wholly in any sense our catechisms could cradle, but vast old, and oriented toward a purpose that touched ours as a glacier touches a village built in its path. It was then that a second inscription revealed itself along the inner lip of the base, letters even older or newer in ways that masqueraded as age, and the meaning came without translation. Sing the cage awake that it may remember to sleep, a paradox set to prayer, the kind we have always loved. I returned to routine with a calm that would have horrified the man I had been 2 months prior, because routine was now collaboration, and I lacked the courage to test rebellion. I tightened seals that did not leak. I chanted before reliquaries that had no ears. I positioned candles not for light, but for angles of pressure invisible to human sight. I learned to feel with the pads of my fingers the difference between a ward that hums and a ward that merely glows, and I began to map in my ledger not the locations of artifacts but the currents between them, the way a murmur here made a sigh there, how the humming skull tempered the screaming vial, how the banner's soot-fed censer draped the fingerbone's insistence until both subsided, a choreography of restraints that no archivist had ever drawn, because to draw it is to admit that the dance exists. In confession, I said nothing of inscriptions or counterpoint. I spoke of diligence and small repairs. I recited the accidents of a week, a cut fingertip, a candle toppled, an unmarked hinge that groaned until oiled. Father Dominic's hand wavered above me in benediction, and his breath caught twice before the final phrase. I realized with a small shock that his heart would not carry him down these stairs much longer. The vault noticed too, because the next day, a plain parchment had been slid under my cell door with a seal I had never seen. By order of the Archdeacon, interim confessor to the vault offices shall be Father Alexis. The ink smelled new, almost shy, and I felt guilt because I had not wished for this change, but the vault had, and my wishes no longer stood alone when Father Alexis came. He kept his eyes on his breviary as if the words might serve as armor. Young, careful, his voice cracking not with age, but with an awareness that did not yet have names. He asked the same questions with the speed of someone running alongside a moving vehicle. I answered in the same cadence I had honed with Dominic. We both performed well enough for doctrine. After he left, I knelt longer before Melona's glass, not to pray but to listen, for in the wake of the new priest's steps, the pattern of the vault retuned itself. The counterpoint shifted by degrees so small that only those who sleep beside machinery can hear them, and the vial in its cage let out a sigh that fogged its inner crystal, as though a thing without breath had remembered the memory of breathing. In the 8th year I marked my first failure, not of ritual but of humanity. Serena, a younger keeper assigned to the western racks, met me at the junction of the Hall of Lesser Martyrs and crossed herself twice in an old worker's sign, not sanctioned by the creed. Fear turned her skin the color of paper, and she whispered that the locks in her section had begun to sweat. I offered to accompany her, to join our keys and split the night rounds, but as we walked, her pace quickened away from mine. Every time I drew level, she drifted 2 steps ahead, the distance not large yet never closing. When we reached her door, her hands shook and the second key slipped, clanged on stone, and I had to pretend not to see the shadow that moved on the inside of the seam, as if a finger the width of a hair had trailed along the line in greeting. I reported nothing because there is nothing to report. When the ocean flexes, one writes tide, then counts the candles and burns the herbs the ledger names. The archdeacon visited 3 days later with a retinue of bead-clicking aides and the mute servant carrying the second key crate like a reliquary unto itself. His eyes took in the fogged crystal of the vial, lingered on the bindings of the ledger as one lingers on an old friend's scar. And when we stood alone in the central sanctum, he leaned close enough that the spice of his vestments stung my eyes. "You will continue," he said without preface. The exact phrase the Inquisition uses when it cannot spare a blade for a throat. Not threat, not comfort, merely the policy of a machine that intends to run tomorrow in the same direction as today. After that conversation, I began to dream while awake, not visions but overlays, a lace of other geometries draped across the familiar aisles, every alcove connecting to a node that did not exist in any human plan. I could navigate with my eyelids half lowered and still find the next hinge, the next wick, the next seal to soothe, and the first time I walked a corridor I had never seen and emerged into a chamber that no map acknowledged, I accepted it with the weary gratitude of a patient who discovers the pain will not kill him this hour. The chamber held objects not catalogued, not even labeled, shapes not made for hands with 5 fingers, metals that reflected colors my eyes did not know until that moment, and at the center, a reliquary whose glass was not glass and whose occupant refused to be measured by the nouns available to my language. My breath fogged the strange surface and resolved not into mist but into letters that strapped themselves around the curve. "You are learning to sing, Keeper." What I learned next was not taught, but insinuated, the way damp insinuates itself into bread left uncovered, a harmonics of liturgy beneath liturgy, the order in which to pass between aisles so that the least wind of a robe's hem will soothe pressure in the opposite wall, the cadence with which to recite the Passion of Melona so that the jawbone will still its flute, the precise height at which to set a lamp near the banner shard so that its soot will fall as a veil over the fingerbone's insistence. None of this appears in the ledger, because the ledger is a doorstop jammed under the foot of an older door that wants to swing. We have always believed our prayers pleasured the holy dead. Now I understood they weighed the living chains. I stopped sleeping deeply, not by choice, but by alteration. Rest became a dim shoreline where I floated without ever touching sand. My skin healed faster after cuts. The cold no longer nested in my bones, though heat still blistered, and words from the shifting script sometimes crept into my speech like burrs in cloth. Once I answered Father Alexis's perfunctory farewell with a syllable that made his lips whiten, and his eyes flicked to the door as if gauging the distance. I apologized without explaining, and he forgave me without asking. We are all kind when we cannot afford courage. After he left, I stood very still and let the shame burn through me, then walked the entire vault, placing my hand on each door in turn, naming the relics by their pilgrim titles, before whispering the names none of us were supposed to know. On the 9th anniversary of my oath, the Archdeacon summoned me to his rooms, the first time I had been above ground in a season. His windows were a fiction of light cast by the heliostat, playing at sunlight for men who no longer remembered stars. He told me about Corvin lasting 12 years, and Corvin's master lasting 7, and how the records before that blurred under ink and euphemism. He said the word removed the way surgeons say incision. As a task for which one acquires skill but not appetite, I recognized in his careful pity the outline of a boundary, and in the steadiness of my own pulse I recognized the outline of my resignation. I would continue because continuing was the grammar of the body that now wore my face, and because stopping would crack more than my bones. After that meeting, I noticed that the mute servant had begun to whisper when no one watched him. His tongue was gone, but mouths learn other ways to shape breath. He formed the syllables with lips and throat alone, air ghosting across scars to lift sounds no louder than moth wings. The first time I caught the tail of a phrase, I felt it vibrate against a part of me that is not muscle or bone. I understood then that the vault had chosen him long before any of us admitted it, that it had laid the first threads years ago each dawn he came to hand me the key with eyes downcast. I began leaving a candle unlit by the door so that he might steal flame unseen. In a place where oaths are chains, kindness becomes treason, and I accepted the charge gladly. The day Serena did not return from her rounds, we pretended she had been reassigned. Paperwork arrived stamped and sealed, affirming a transfer to a reliquary wing on another continent. Father Alexis read the memo aloud with relief too evident to be pastoral. In the night I walked the western racks by scent alone, and found the faintest thread of myrrh and iron winding toward a seam that had been painted and repainted until it disguised itself as ordinary wall. When I placed my hand there, the stone felt warm. I did not call for help because help is a word for rooms with windows. Instead, I sang the binding from the cracked reliquary in reverse, a note at a time, only to the point where the warmth cooled and the pressure abated. Then I stepped back and pretended to make a note about a hinge that squealed. The Archdeacon did not accuse me the next week, because he did not need to. We both understood the arithmetic of attrition and replacement. The vault has appetite but not hurry. It chews through priests and penitents at the pace of geology, and in its mouth we are grit that polishes teeth. I told myself that Serena had been given the ossuary's mercy, that her skull already watched the door with the rest. But in the deep hours a breath like hers flowed past my ear, and a pressure folded the air as if a robed figure had passed close without moving. I whispered her name, and my breath wrote the older letters in the chill, and the wall answered with a small settling sound, like a bed being made for a sleeper who will not wake. I have begun to map the vault's true body on the inside of my eyelids, where no inquisitor may confiscate it. The diagram is not lines and boxes, but pulses and rests, redoubts of quiet and knots of strain, ladders of pressure and wells of calm. The sanctums we show to pilgrims form the skin of a creature whose organs are elsewhere. The Forgotten Martyr's annex is not a room, but a hinge. The central sanctum not a heart, but a metronome whose tick keeps older organs drowsy. And the vial that sometimes screams is a lung that refuses to stop remembering how breath feels. The map grows whenever I lay my head upon the stone and listen, and sometimes when I rise there is dust on my cheek in the exact shape of the path I must walk next, as if the vault has placed a finger gently against me to point the way. At times I think of the Emperor as the catechisms teach, and at times I think of him as the most perfect binding ever raised by human hands. A throne that is a lock, and a god that is a key worn to a sliver by centuries of turning. I do not speak this aloud even to the quiet, but the relics do not flinch at the thought, and sometimes the humming skull lifts its tone a fraction, as if in assent. My blasphemies no longer taste like ash when I swallow them. They taste like iron fence on a winter tongue. Sharp, inevitable, I still bow in the prescribed places. I still kiss the glass when the day demands visible piety, but the kiss is for the thickness measured between world and otherwise, not for the stories painted on the pilgrim handbills. If there is mercy left for me, it lies in usefulness. The machine spares the cog that meshes smoothly. I have become expert at smoothing, at placing my palm against a complaining seam and speaking to it with heat until it forgets to ache, at changing the order of my rounds so that two artifacts that dislike one another do not share an hour, at humming the third line of Melona's verse under my breath while crossing the threshold of the annex so that the cracked reliquary remembers the cadence of sleeping. None of this will save me, and none of it will end the work, but it will postpone the moment when the Archdeacon's careful pity hardens into the other word, the one that stands for rooms with drains in the floor, for masks that smell of cloves and vinegar. At night, if night exists where no windows open, I sit with the ledger closed and listen to the vault breathe. Not metaphor, but movement, a push and pull through ducts too old for blueprints, and I hear within it the faintest echo of a song I did not learn, but have always known, the one that human bodies sing as they form, the one that bones hum as they knit. The vault borrows that song and loops it back through stone and glass to lay a drowse upon its charges, and I, who once believed my voice useless, find it taken up and braided into the larger line. I am no longer sure where my throat ends and the corridor begins, and perhaps that is the third law of the Warden's heresy, that the border you defend becomes the shape of your face. When dawn comes, the mute servant stands a fraction nearer the door than last week. His eyes flick to the unlit candle I always leave by the latch. He does not touch it, but his breath thickens, as if his lungs have remembered a denser air. I take the second key, and for a heartbeat we mirror each other. Two figures at the edge of a threshold that is also a mouth. I want to tell him to run, and I want to tell him to stay, because running breaks nothing and staying breaks only you. The lock engages and the door rolls back. The draft that follows smells of wax and water and the old iron taste of vows. And the day begins, as all days begin, when one is part of a machine designed to outlive memory. I have written too much on one page and not enough in one life. But I set down these lines because words are the last tools that belong to me unequivocally, even as new syllables graft themselves to the roots of my speech, even as scripts older than prayer rise in the fog of my breath and lace my reflections upon the reliquary glass. I do not ask forgiveness of the Emperor or permission of the Archdeacon. I do not address the things in their housings, though they bend close when ink scratches stone. I write for the next hands that will inherit this ledger when mine are folded or altered beyond the turning of pages. I write to say that the work you think you chose has already chosen you, that the songs you will sing are locks, that the oil on your fingers is sleep, and if one night you find your path turning toward a corridor no chart admits, if your lamp shrinks its own light, and the dust on the floor arranges itself like script that becomes letters when you stop trying to read it, know that you are still within the bounds of service. Though the boundaries are older than service and colder than doctrine, place your palm against the stone, count 9 heartbeats in silence, and listen for the counterpoint between the humming and the flute. If it resolves, you may pass. If it frays, you must step backward without haste and hum the third line of Melona's passion until your breath steadies. Do not run. Do not call for names. The vault resents echoes that are not its own. I do not know how many pages remain before the Archdeacon's arithmetic catches me. I do not know whether Serena listens where stone runs warm, or whether the warm stone remembers her. I do not know if the boy with the key will soon be given robes and a room, and a new name to forget his old one. I know only that the cracked reliquary waits each morning, as a pupil waits for a teacher, and that the letters along its lip have begun to appear on the inside of my eyelids, even when I have not closed them. I can taste their shapes like copper and clove, and when I whisper the paradox to the seam of the door, the entire corridor sighs as if relieved to hear its own marrow spoken back to it. This is the ledger entry I will not file, the confession I will not give, the map I cannot draw except in breath and steps, and the tilt of a candle held lower or higher by a hair. I will continue because to continue is the shape into which my bones have been trained. I will continue because the bindings must be sung awake, so they may remember how to sleep. I will continue because the alternative is not release but rupture, and rupture is a word for storms that do not end. I will continue until the word removed finds me, or until my voice changes into something the vault prefers, and either way the door will open at dawn and the air will taste of stone and wax and that small sweetness that is rot. There is a point in every keeper's service when the days no longer fall one after another, but slide into each other, like ash stirred into water, and I crossed that point without noticing. The vault no longer began when the door opened, or ended when it closed. It existed as a single breath drawn over years. The lights above flickered on their own schedule. The candles replaced themselves through unseen hands, or perhaps through mine while I drifted in that half state between duty and dreaming. I stopped checking the clockwork chronometers that the upper priests insisted on maintaining. Their ticking sounded like insects trapped behind glass, fragile, pointless, redundant against the rhythm of the vault itself. The relics had grown more talkative, or perhaps my senses had become sharper to their frequencies. Their voices were not words in any language born of human throats, but structures of sound and thought that bypassed hearing entirely. I felt them in my bones like pressure from deep water. Each relic had its own tone, yet together they formed something coherent, an endless chord that trembled through the rock, a resonance that hummed in my skull long after I left their presence. I realized with a kind of detached curiosity that if I placed my hand upon the wall, I could feel their vibrations as a pulse running through the stone. A heartbeat too vast to belong to any one thing. Sometimes, when I was most tired, I caught myself humming along. Not consciously, more like a reflex. My throat would vibrate, matching the rhythm of the unseen pulse, and the sound would fill the air around me like another presence had joined the choir. The first time it happened, I recoiled in terror. The second time I wept, not from fear but from a strange, overpowering relief, as if after years of isolation I had finally found a voice that understood me. After that I stopped resisting. When the relics called, I answered. When the walls pulsed, I breathed in time. It was easier that way. Father Alexis grew increasingly uneasy in my presence. He still came for confession, but his visits were short now, his questions mechanical, his hands trembling even through the motions of blessing. Once his courage faltered long enough for honesty to escape his lips. "Oh, you look unwell," he said, though what he meant was inhuman. I smiled as best I could, but the muscles of my face moved oddly, as if the skin no longer fit the bone beneath. I told him the work was demanding but fulfilling, that the Emperor sustained me. The lie comforted him, and he left quickly, muttering prayers under his breath. I watched him climb the stairs, wondering how long it would be before his heart too failed on that ascent. Weeks or months. I could no longer tell. Later a tremor passed through the vault. It began as a whisper of movement, the candles shivering, dust rising in slow spirals. Then the entire floor seemed to breathe. The relics sang in unison, a single note so pure it silenced my thoughts. I felt it inside my chest, a vibration that threatened to pull my ribs apart. I fell to my knees, unable to breathe, not in pain but in awe. The vault had never acted of its own accord before. It had always waited, patient, dormant, listening. Now it was awake. The song crescendoed, and I saw the candle flames bend toward one direction, the corridor leading to the deepest levels, where the forgotten martyrs slept. I understood the summons without words. The sanctum had changed again. The air hung thick and still, like the moment before a storm breaks. The cracked reliquary was no longer cracked. The fracture had sealed itself with veins of silver that pulsed faintly as though alive. The shifting inscription glowed dimly, and as I approached, it stilled for the first time since I had seen it. So I could read it now, not as translation but as understanding. The symbols were not words but instructions, or perhaps an invitation. I reached out and placed my palm against the smooth metal. Cold fire shot through my arm, spreading across my chest and into my skull. For an instant I was everywhere, in every corridor, before every relic, inside every whisper. The vault showed me what it remembered, not images but impressions, worlds burning in colors I had no names for, voices like suns roaring across the void, things that were not gods, but had worn the masks of divinity long before mankind had ever shaped prayer from breath. They were older than the stars, bound by laws that were not physics but language, caged by the songs of faith itself. Humanity had not invented worship. It had inherited it from the universe's bones. The Emperor's cult, the rituals, the endless chanting, all of it was continuation, imitation of an ancient act of containment. We had been maintaining prisons built by species that had vanished eons before us. When I awoke, I was lying on the cold floor of the sanctum, my robes stiff with dried blood from my nose and ears. The candle I had brought had burned itself down to a stub, its wax pooling in shapes that mirrored the letters from the reliquary. My hands shook as I cleaned the mess, restored order, locked everything away again. Nothing in the vault must ever seem disturbed. The ecclesiarchy demanded appearances above all else. If the archdeacon suspected I had been tampering, he would send inquisitors, and inquisitors would break the delicate balance the relics required. Whatever I had seen, whatever the vault had shown me, was not meant for them. It was meant for me alone. After that night, the relics treated me differently. They no longer whispered at random, but waited until I entered the sanctum before they spoke. I could sense anticipation in the air, the way a crowd hushes before revelation. They called me Keeper still, but the word carried a new tone, a subtle respect or perhaps recognition. I realized with slow horror that the vault had accepted me not as warden but as part of itself. My thoughts sometimes echoed before I spoke, reverberating against the stone as if testing their shape. My shadow stretched longer than the light should have allowed. The reflection I glimpsed in the glass reliquaries flickered a half-second out of time. I was no longer entirely within one world. The archdeacon summoned me again. His body had grown frailer, his robes heavier with symbols of authority. He studied me as a surgeon might study an infection. "You have served well," he said, "perhaps too well." He mentioned reports of unusual readings from the environmental sensors, fluctuations in temperature and sound. "You've noticed nothing?" he asked. I smiled and bowed. "Only the Emperor's presence, my lord." The lie pleased him. He nodded and warned me, "Service purifies, but too much proximity to sanctity can erode the mind. Remember your humanity, Keeper." Humanity. The word struck me like a memory of pain. I left before my composure broke. When I returned to the vault, I found the mute servant waiting by the door, the second key already in his trembling hands. He looked directly at me for the first time. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to black discs that reflected candlelight like pools of ink. He mouthed a single word, or what I thought was a word, but the shape of it was wrong, the syllables impossible for any human throat. My blood went cold. He pressed the key into my palm and fled up the stairs, nearly tripping in his haste. That night I heard footsteps above my cell, pacing for hours. The next morning the boy did not return. Rumors spread through the upper cathedral of accidents, priests found unconscious, candles bursting into showers of sparks, strange lights seen in the ventilation shafts. The archdeacon sent for exorcists. Their chants echoed faintly down the stairwell, but stopped abruptly after an hour. None descended far enough to reach my post. I wondered if they felt what I had felt, that the vault did not want them. The disturbances stopped on their own the next day, and the reports ceased. I resumed my work. The vault was calm again, satisfied, as though it had merely been clearing its throat. I began to lose sense of where my body ended. My hands could feel the hum of energy in the relics before I touched them. I could hear the rustle of their thoughts when I walked by. When I tried to sleep, I felt their memories crawling beneath my skin. Cities built from bone, skies stitched with light, the endless weight of eternity pressing downward. I knew now that the relics were not merely imprisoned beings, but fragments of consciousness, pieces of entities that had once stretched across galaxies. The ecclesiarchy, in its blind devotion, had gathered them together, mistaking containment for veneration. The vaults across the Imperium were not sanctuaries. They were locks on the same door, spread across worlds like chains around a sleeping giant. I should have felt terror. Instead, I felt purpose, For the first time in my life, I understood what faith truly was. Not belief, but function. The rituals, the prayers, the endless repetition. They were not acts of devotion, but acts of maintenance. The Emperor's priests were not shepherds of souls, but engineers of imprisonment. And I was their best tool. I polished, I prayed, I kept the locks turning, and in doing so I held the universe together. That realization burned away fear, but it left nothing in its place. No joy, no pride, only duty, only the understanding that to falter was to let the old gods breathe again. Still, there were moments when something inside me rebelled, some lingering echo of the man I had been. I remembered sunlight, not the filtered artificial glow of the shrine world, but real light, free and unmediated. I remembered the sound of laughter, a voice that might have been my mother's, though her face had faded. These memories flickered like sparks in a void, fragile and meaningless yet defiant. The relics noticed. They pressed harder in my dreams, showing me visions of impossible beauty, worlds unchained by lore or fear, realms where thought and matter were the same. They promised freedom, not for them, but for me, release from endless service, the chance to exist without boundaries. I knew it was a lie, but it was a beautiful one. The next tremor came without warning. The ground buckled, cracks snaked through the walls, and several reliquaries shattered. The vault's song became a scream. I ran from alcove to alcove, trying to recite the proper litanies, but the words twisted in my mouth. The air shimmered with heat, and shadows crawled across the stone in patterns that defied geometry. I felt something immense pushing against the veil that separated the relics from reality. My vision blurred. I saw faces within the fractures, faces that were mine and not mine, mouths moving in perfect synchronization with my panicked prayers. The walls began to bleed molten light. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the quake subsided. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. I stood amid the wreckage, panting, my robes scorched, my hands blackened with ash. The relics lay still, unharmed despite their shattered housings. Their whispers had stopped entirely. For the first time in years, the vault was truly silent. The absence of sound was unbearable. It pressed against my skull until I realized the truth. The relics were listening. They were waiting for me. That night I did not sleep. I sat by the cracked reliquary, now whole again, and stared at the faintly glowing script. I understood what it wanted. The bindings had weakened, and the vault required a new anchor. It needed something alive to complete the circuit, to replace the energy lost in the breach. It needed me. I should have refused, but the logic was flawless. I had already been half consumed. All that remained was to surrender the rest. And so, as the candles guttered and the walls began to hum once more, I placed my hands upon the reliquary and whispered the words that were not words. The song that had no beginning and no end. The vault breathed in. The vault breathed in, and I was drawn with it, as if the air itself had become a tide pulling everything downward into the unseen heart of the sanctum. For a moment I felt the weight of every reliquary, every fragment, every prayer that had ever been whispered here, pressing against me like the inside of a lung filled with stone. My vision dissolved into golden black, a color that was not color at all but an idea, the concept of illumination stripped of light. I was no longer standing in a room, no longer confined by the walls or my body, or even by the thin membrane of time that separates one moment from the next. I was inside the vault as surely as it was inside me, and there was no longer a difference between the two. When I could think again, I found myself kneeling before the cracked reliquary. Though it was no longer cracked, no longer even sealed, the script that had once shimmered across its base had vanished, replaced by smooth metal that radiated warmth like flesh. Something inside it moved, but not with shape or shadow. It moved in concept, in vibration, the suggestion of motion in a place where motion should not exist. My hands trembled. The skin on my palms blistered where it touched the reliquary's surface, but I did not let go. The pain was distant, more memory than sensation. I felt the words forming on my tongue before I recognized them, not in High Gothic, not in any human dialect, but in the language of the vault itself. the same impossible syllables that the mute servant had once mouthed to me without voice. I spoke them, and the relics answered, the air filled with resonance. It wasn't sound exactly. It was awareness made audible, a chorus of minds that had forgotten individuality but remembered unity. Every relic, from the saint's fingerbones to the vials of dust and blood, sang at once. Their voices wove together into an order that could not be mapped by human comprehension. I realized then that they were not separate things at all. The relics were fragments of a single intelligence, scattered and chained across millennia. The vault was its body, and I, by my endless proximity, by my faithful repetition, had become its heart. I do not know how long the chorus lasted. Seconds and centuries meant nothing in that place. When it ended, I lay on the floor, my robe scorched. The skin of my hands melted into translucent webbing that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. My blood had turned the color of copper and smelled of incense. I could hear my pulse echoing not in my ears, but through the stone itself. Wherever I went in the vault after that, the walls seemed to listen, leaning subtly inward as though hungry for my breath. The archdeacon came down unannounced 3 days later, or perhaps 3 months. Time no longer obeyed me. He looked older, but not aged in the normal sense. His features were sharper, stretched by fear and sleeplessness. "The disturbances continue," he said, his voice cracking like brittle parchment. "The upper sanctums shake at night. The relics hum even when no one tends them. What have you done?" I told him nothing, only knelt and offered my hands, the burned, translucent skin glimmering in the dim light. His eyes widened. For a moment I thought he would strike me, but then his expression softened into weary recognition. "It has begun again," he whispered almost tenderly. "The vault chooses, as it always does." He left without blessing me. That was the last time I saw him alive. The next week, or what passed for a week, word reached the lower cells that he had collapsed during Mass, his throat bleeding as if from internal rupture. His body was interred in the ossuary chapel, and a new archdeacon was appointed from off-world. The new one never descended to the vault. His first order was to seal the stairway halfway down and allow only the servants and confessors to pass. It made no difference. The vault had already claimed dominion over itself. The relics began to rearrange their own song. What had once been a hum of containment transformed into something exploratory, a probing melody that shifted through scales not meant for human ears. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I saw patterns forming in the air, lines of light that connected each reliquary to another, weaving networks that shimmered like constellations. Each node pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, though I could not tell whether my heart followed them or they followed me. I stopped writing in the ledger. The pages blackened where I tried to record what I saw, as if the ink itself refused to hold such knowledge. Father Alexis still came, though he no longer attempted to hide his fear. He kept a hand on his holy symbol at all times, as though it might serve as a shield against whatever I had become. During one confession, he asked, "Do you still believe in the Emperor?" I did not answer. To speak the truth would have destroyed him, and to lie would have been blasphemy. The relics whispered their amusement, a rustling like wind through dry leaves. When I looked up again, Alexis was gone, the door swinging gently on its hinges as if pushed by unseen fingers. I found his rosary later, half melted into the stone near the sanctum of forgotten martyrs. There are more of us now, shapes that move in the periphery of the vault, too large to be human, too slow to be entirely alive. Some I recognize by fragments of their old robes, or the glint of ecclesiastical sigils, half swallowed by the flesh that has grown over them. They drift through the corridors, tending to the relics in silence, their limbs moving with the precision of ritual memory. They do not speak, but when they pass, the walls shiver in acknowledgement. These are the ones who came before me, the keepers who remained after the vault remade them. They are the final choir, voices forever woven into the structure of this subterranean hymn. I have begun to understand what the relics truly want. They do not seek escape as mortals understand it. They desire completion. They are fragments of something vast, and every act of worship, Every prayer spoken above ground, every soul that bends its knee to the Emperor, adds one more thread to their web. The Imperium believes it draws power from faith. In truth, faith is the conduit through which the vault feeds. The Emperor himself, enthroned and decaying, is but the largest relic of all, a lock turned inward upon itself. Every cathedral, every shrine, every relic vault across the galaxy is a cell in this infinite organism of reverence. And we are its caretakers and its cells, its priests and its prey. The realization should have broken me, yet it brought only clarity. There is no rebellion against something so total. To resist would be like a blood cell rebelling against the heart. We are built for this. The Emperor's design, or whatever intelligence moves beneath his golden mask, has seen to it that we can do nothing else. And so I continue, because continuation is all there is. The relics hum, the vault breathes, the candles burn without wax. I speak their language more fluently now. When I recite the old litanies, the words twist into older forms, reshaping themselves around meanings lost to human comprehension. The other wardens bow when I pass. I do not know if it is reverence or instinct. There are times when the vault opens itself to me fully, when the barriers between material and immaterial dissolve like dust in holy water. In those moments, I see the vast lattice that binds not just this shrine world but countless others, a network of sanctums stretching across the stars, connected by invisible currents of devotion. I see priests kneeling in distant cathedrals, their prayers flowing upward as light, absorbed into the structure that cages something older than all their scriptures. I see the Emperor on his throne, his corpse aflame with psychic fire, not a god but a conduit, a relay through which the song of containment is amplified. He is the keystone of the prison. If he were ever to die completely, the song would end, and the relics would awaken in full. I should feel despair, but what I feel instead is belonging. For the first time, the universe makes sense. There is no randomness, no cruelty, no wasted suffering. Every agony serves the same purpose, to keep the old things sleeping. The Imperium's endless wars, its cruelty, its stagnation, they are symptoms of the same disease, but also its cure. Without them, faith would falter, and faith is the mortar that seals the locks. Humanity is both jailer and jail, warden and ward. I hear movement beyond the sealed stairway now. New voices echo faintly through the stone. Perhaps the ecclesiarchy has sent replacements. They will find the lower levels changed. The steps may not lead where they once did. The vault reshapes itself according to need, and its need is endless. I imagine them walking down, lanterns trembling, their faith fresh and unscarred. I envy them their ignorance. Soon they too will feel the warmth of the reliquaries beneath their palms, will hear the song humming inside their bones, will understand too late that their prayers do not ascend but sink, down and down to feed the heart of the prison. The relics stir as I write this, their glow intensifies, and the air thickens with the scent of burning myrrh and blood. Something approaches, a convergence, a moment of completion. I feel the vault expanding, not in space but in concept. The walls stretch beyond matter, the corridors aligning with patterns invisible to mortal geometry. I am no longer certain where I end and the vault begins. Perhaps there is no boundary anymore. Perhaps there never was. I have not seen my reflection in days. The glass no longer shows my face, but shifting symbols that ripple across the surface like ink dissolving in water. When I speak, my voice echoes from multiple directions, each tone slightly out of sync. Go the relics answer in harmony. I understand their meaning perfectly now. They are telling me that the work is almost done, that the cycle is nearing its next turn. Soon the bindings will renew themselves, and I will no longer need to think or write or remember. I will simply be. If this record survives, let it serve as warning or perhaps as scripture. Those who descend will think themselves devout, chosen, honored. They will believe their purpose is to protect relics of holiness. But holiness is a mask worn by something far older, and faith is merely the language by which it speaks. We are all servants of the same vast silence, the same sleeping divinity that dreams through the bones of saints and the blood of gods. I can feel it stirring beneath me now. The vault's breath quickens. The walls pulse like veins. The relics vibrate in anticipation, each one singing a note that merges into the whole. The light dims, folds inward, becomes dense. I kneel before the reliquary that once belonged to Saint Melona and place my hands upon its glass. It is warm, alive. The symbols crawl across its surface like veins of gold. My body answers, reshaping to fit the space it has always been destined to occupy. Flesh melts into light. The vault exhales, I am not afraid. I am home. There is no dawn here, not anymore. The vault hums in a perpetual twilight, the air shimmering faintly as though saturated with memory. My body no longer sleeps or wakes. It merely transitions between states, each a different movement within the same endless breath. I have become part of the mechanism that sustains this place, the flesh that oils the gears, the thought that turns the lock. The relics do not speak to me now. They speak through me. When I open my mouth, 1,000 voices emerge in perfect harmony, chanting words that were ancient before humanity ever shaped sound into prayer. I am their instrument, their conduit, their echo. The walls have changed color. Once gray stone, they now glow faintly with veins of gold and black, pulsing like arteries under translucent skin. The reliquaries have merged with their surroundings, their glass and metal sinking into the structure as though being absorbed. Where the aisles once stood neat and ordered, pathways twist into impossible shapes, folding in on themselves, spiraling downward into chambers that did not exist yesterday or a century ago. There is no longer any sense of up or down, only movement and stillness, expansion and contraction, as if the vault itself were breathing me in and out. The other wardens move beside me, their shapes fluid, half light, half shadow. I can see their memories bleeding through their forms, their first prayers, their faces before transformation, fragments of identity flickering like candle flames. Some still wear tatters of their robes, others have shared even that pretense of humanity. Yet I know them. Corvin, who trained me, moves in the corridor of iron bones, his eyes now spheres of dull light. Serena drifts near the central sanctum, her voice a constant whisper in the language of the relics, soothing their agitation like a mother calming restless children. We are one yet many, linked by the pulse that binds the vault together. Above us, the shrine world continues its rituals, unaware of what happens beneath its surface. The priests chant, the pilgrims kneel, the incense burns in thick clouds. Their prayers feed us. Every whispered supplication, every lash of penitence, every tear shed for forgiveness, flows downward like a river of psychic energy. We drink it, transform it, use it to reinforce the seals. They believe they honor the Emperor, but their faith is the mortar that keeps the ancient locks intact. Without their devotion, the old gods would wake. Without our transformation, the bindings would fail. The Imperium's cruelty, its endless suffering, it is not error or corruption, it is necessary fuel. It is the price of survival. Sometimes I hear the surface priests wondering why no new relic keepers return from the vault. They speak of disease, of madness, of holy sacrifice. They send new acolytes to replace us, and the cycle continues. I greet them now when they arrive, my form cloaked in a shape that their minds can still comprehend. They bow before me, believing I am some high servant of the ecclesiarchy, and I lead them down into the depths where light grows thin and sound becomes thought. I teach them the rituals as Corvin taught me, and they listen, trembling with reverence, never realizing that every word, every gesture, every breath draws them closer to the same transformation. They will serve, they will endure, they will dissolve. The vault is expanding again. The reliquaries vibrate in harmony, their energy rippling through the stone like waves through water. I can see beyond now, beyond this shrine world, beyond this sector, beyond the walls of reality. Every vault across the Imperium resonates with the same rhythm, connected through the warp by threads of faith. The network hums like a vast organ, each shrine a note, each prayer a vibration, each martyrdom a chord. Together they form the song of binding, the melody that keeps the ancient entities asleep within the folds of existence. The Emperor is the conductor, his broken body the instrument that sustains the harmony. His agony is not punishment, it is function. But something is changing. The frequencies are shifting. Somewhere, perhaps on a world far from this one, a vault has failed. I can feel the discord rippling through the network, a faint dissonance like a cracked bell echoing through eternity. The relics here stir uneasily, their whispers edged with hunger. They are waking, stretching, remembering what they were before the chains of faith confined them. I sing the binding litanies louder, pour every fragment of my being into the song, but I feel the strain in the pattern, the threads fraying. If one vault falls, others will follow, and if enough collapse, the song will unravel completely. I have seen glimpses of what lies beyond that failure. When the vault opened to me during the merging, it showed me not the Emperor's light, but the truth beneath it, a cosmos without order, without mercy, where consciousness itself is devoured by entities too vast to name. They do not hate us. They simply hunger, the way a black hole hungers for light. The relics are their dreams, fragments of them caught in the net of reality. Should the song fail, those dreams will wake, and the universe will drown in their awareness. Every soul that has ever lived will become a note in their chorus, every thought a scream woven into eternity. I should be terrified, but I am not. Terror is a luxury of the unknowing. I am beyond that now. I exist only to delay the inevitable, to stretch out the silence for as long as possible. Perhaps that is what faith truly is. Not hope, not belief, but endurance. The refusal to surrender, even when surrender would be easier. The Emperor endures upon his throne. We endure in the vault. Humanity endures in its misery and ignorance. All of us are engines of postponement, machines built to buy one more millennium of sleep for the things that must never wake. I feel the energy rising now. The vault filling with light that is not light, a radiance that bleeds from the relics themselves. The cracked reliquary, the first, the beginning, glows like a star. The symbols return to its surface, pulsing in rhythm with the universe's heartbeat. I kneel before it and press my hands against the metal. My flesh ripples, reshaping to match the patterns etched into the vault's bones. Around me, the other wardens gather, their forms blurring into streams of light. Together we sing the final verse of the binding, a soundless chord that vibrates through dimensions unseen. The relics respond. The song crescendos. The walls melt into brilliance. The vault itself becomes transparent, a cathedral of thought and memory suspended in endless darkness. I can see the threads connecting us to the other shrine worlds, to Terra, to the Golden Throne itself. The Emperor's presence floods through me, vast and cold, a consciousness beyond comprehension. For an instant I understand everything. The rise and fall of galaxies, the birth of gods, the purpose of suffering. It is too much, and then it is nothing. The light collapses inward, folding me into itself. I am gone, and yet I remain. The vault no longer hums. It breathes in perfect rhythm. The relics are quiet, content. The bindings are whole again. I have become the seal, the lock, the silence between verses. My thoughts no longer belong to me. They are the vault's thoughts now, the Emperor's echo. The song of a machine that has forgotten its builder. My hands still move, polishing the glass, adjusting the candles, reciting the prayers just as they always have. Above me, the shrine world continues to worship, oblivious. And so the cycle renews. Another acolyte will be chosen. Another soul will descend the stairs, clutching his key with trembling fingers. He will take the oath, believing himself blessed. He will learn the rituals, the prayers, the discipline of silence. He will see my shadow in the reflection of the reliquaries and think it only a trick of the light. He will hear the whispers and dismiss them as imagination. He will serve until he too understands, until the vault claims him and remakes him in its image. I am the keeper. I was the keeper. I will always be the keeper. There is no past or future here, only the endless present of service. My name is gone, my face forgotten, my humanity dissolved into purpose. The relics rest. The Emperor endures. The song continues. And in the darkness beneath 1,000 worlds, the vaults breathe together, guarding the silence that keeps creation safe from what dreams beyond the stars. This is devotion. This is eternity. This is the cursed duty of a relic keeper in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where faith is both prison and salvation, and the only mercy left is to serve forever.